Hello there, as Obi-Wan Kenobi would say. This is not, unfortunately, Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's just little old Anthony. Anthony with the Dragons of Victory. I hope you're all doing well. I wanted to talk today about two people we're all familiar with, Jesus Christ and Socrates. I've, lost my faith, but I still believe that Jesus Christ was a real person, like a real historical figure. Every serious biblical scholar, historian does agree with that. And but some people, after they lose their faith, go so hardcore as to try and deny that Jesus even existed at all. And when you start to do that, I think you're just denying the historical evidence there. But of course, it doesn't mean he was supernatural or divine or the Son of God. But there's a reason why we're so drawn to him, and it's very similar to why we're all drawn to Socrates, I would say. Um, you look at the basic structure of Socrates' life and you compare that to the basic structure of Jesus' life, and they're very, very similar. Both kind of like both preachers. You could think of Socrates, I think, as a preacher in a way, like a secular prophet, a philosophical, a prophet of philosophy as opposed to religion. And they were both sort of like they didn't have their own institution. It was just them out talking with people out in the wilderness, and it was just there was a purity and a simplicity to their method and their approach to people. And of course, they both raised the ire of the authorities, and they were both put to death, executed publicly. Uh, and of course, executions up until recent history, a lot of people don't realize, were always public spectacles. They were meant to scare you, like you screw up, this is going to happen to you. And so men, women, and children would all watch, some guy get hanged or crucified or beheaded or whatever. But Jesus and Socrates were both put to death ultimately for what they believed and what they taught. And they both had the opportunity to recant or, reject their previous statements in order to spare their life, but they chose not to. Of course, if you're a Christian, if you still have faith, you believe that there's a divine. In the case of Jesus, there's a divine element in all of that. It was a divine sacrifice. But for me personally, again, I have to accept he was a real historical figure, but I don't believe in in his divinity. I believe though he genuinely thought he was divine. He genuinely thought he was the Son of God, and his sacrifice was pure. He thought he might really achieve uh, what the Jewish prophecy was supposed to fulfill, and he was willing to go through all of that for that, because I believe he was a man who got to the point where um, he was so his soul was so hurt and or by all the awful things in the world, and uh, all the injustice in the world and all the suffering and pain. And he had the gift of communication. He had the uh, just his presence. There's tons of figures throughout history who are like this, who just draw people in for reasons sometimes very, very untangible. But all of the things that is said to have said, some of the most beautiful things that ever been said by anybody, let he who is without sin cast not the first stone. I think that's just the most beautiful thing that's ever been said by anyone. Now, my friend Kevagen of Alexandria, did say in a recent video that there's historical doubt as to whether he even said that. So neither Jesus or Socrates used their hands to pick up a pen. we have to rely on secondhand accounts from people who knew them or claimed to have known them or claimed to have been influenced by them. And there's always going to be that telephone game effect, where ideas get polluted uh, or altered or shifted as time goes on. And I just it's gotten to the point now where I just the differences between the themes of Jesus's ministry and the reality that that it, what his followers were enacting supposedly as his disciples, as the ones following his legacy, fulfilling his wishes, right? I just can't reconcile the Vatican's golden palace in Rome to it's easier for a rich man for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for to a rich man enter the kingdom of heaven. That's just an irreconcilable difference to me among many. So I think that in the case of Jesus and Socrates, honestly, the purity of their intentions and the wisdom of what they taught and what they said were corrupted later to a degree by people who came after them, who were influenced by them, who didn't have or didn't understand fully the purity of their souls, because that's such a rare thing. The reason Jesus and Socrates and many others are so influential to us still today was their interior life. Um, Not necessarily what they said and how they said, but the not just what they said, but what they did in the marriage uh, between those two. How perfectly they go together. That gives them so much integrity that is so attractive to us today because there's so little of it in the world today. Uh, when I said, I think St. Paul corrupted Jesus's teachings and flipped them on his head and made Christianity in his own image. And I think to a degree, Plato did something similar to Socrates. I don't like Plato's idea of the forms, and I don't think Socrates would have liked it either. Because the forms are the idea is right is if you look at a tree, uh, and you look at another tree and they look a little different, but you can still tell they're a tree. Well, they're both trying to meet the form. The idea is there's a perfect tree and out there somewhere, and it doesn't exist in the physical world, but there's like a spiritual, slightly kind of realm where these forms exist, and there's the forms are like the perfect embodiments or the perfect representation of whatever the thing is. So the form of, the perfect man would be the form of man, the perfect woman, form of woman, etc. But we know now through, you know, but from the scientific advancements that have been made since then, right? And we know how evolution works and everything. Things are produced and created in the world over a long, long period of time, over through chaotic and random elements that um, combined, survival of the fittest that create what we have today. Uh, that totally goes against the idea of there being forms, their idea of there being a perfect ideal at the beginning that all these things are striving to. There was, as far as we can tell, if we, looking at the earth and from the record of history and everything, uh, everything around us was created, uh, not it started bad and then it kind of got better. And of course, the idea within the under the underlying idea undergirding beliefs like Christianity and Platonism is completely the opposite of that. There was a beginning that was good and then it got corrupted and over time. And to me, it just seems like, completely the opposite. To me, it seems like at the beginning it was all terrible because human life was almost impossible to manage because we're early men, we're cavemen, we're out in the wilderness, we're trying to protect ourselves and fighting against the animals, the elements and the animals, right? Over time, we've understood the world more, and we can shape it and make it operate the way we want to, as opposed to being at its mercy more and more so as time goes on. Of course, there's the question of will that backfire on us for sure, but I for again what I was saying here with the case of Jesus and the case of Socrates, there's there's a reason, there's a clear reason why both of these men, these figures uh, are so important and continue to be, because we're all striving for the right way to live, the right way to do things. And we look at people who say great things, but then they do awful things, and then it's like, well, if what they do doesn't match with what they say, does what they say even matter or mean anything? And the integrity of Jesus and Socrates is just so compelling to us that it draws us in. But what's tricky about that is that we therefore get, because we want to know what they say, we want to listen to them, all we have is the people who have written for them. If we want to know what Socrates said, we got to go to Plato. If we want to know what Jesus said, we've got to go to the Gospels. Who were disciples of authors of the Gospels were disciples of Paul, who never met Jesus and was, again, I said it before, he just was not a follower of Jesus. The things Paul said and the things Jesus said in many ways just don't go together, but more on that later. Why am I talking about all this? Well, after losing my faith, you know, what faith gives you is meaning and anchor. And when you lose that and you lose any sense of meaning, it's extremely disorienting. But as part of my healing journey, I've realized how important it is to understand that the best we can do and the best you can hope for is to have the integrity that they did. And that's in terms of the personal integrity that Jesus had and that Socrates had. If you can just get that, if you could just figure out how to live like that, where you're, even if it meant costing your life, you care about others, you care about improving around you, improving the lives of those around you, but if your life is threatened by your principle, if it gets to that point and you choose the principle over your own life, um, that that can't help but draw anyone toward your ideas. And the ideas of Jesus and the ideas of Socrates were so um, beautiful and so powerful, but they got clouded, corrupted by their followers. So don't think about your followers. Don't think about your agenda. Don't think about your mission. Just think about your integrity. And I think everything else will follow from that. I think you'll be what you need to be. And you might not feel like you're changing the world by doing that, but I just gave you two examples of that not being the case. They did change the world with their integrity.